Hi guys, Chris from the Ultimate Recycler. Today's video is just a little experiment on grass clippings on small scale composting. I've just mowed my lawns here at the back of the shop, and when I say lawns I really mean weeds, just around all my junk. And if you're interested in having a look at my backyard and its amazingly disturbing state and the cleanup process, I'll put a link up here. I'm doing a series on the cleanups. But look, these grass clippings, I just mowed around the back of the house, which was kind of more grass. It's buffalo and all sorts of other weeds. And then there's a couple of spots near the drain pipes that are quite lush, some broadleaf weeds. And then out the back nature strip, it's dried off a bit. So there's some more dead grass and some barley grass that's gone up to head. So what I think that will provide is a really good mix of nitrogen and carbon. Now when you read about composting, you read that you should have layers of rich nitrogen or greens and then layers of browns. This is kind of all mixed up, so I reckon that'll compost well just on its own. The whole point of this is just a quick, easy composting method for your grass clippings. And I went to look around my compost bins, and I'm currently running worm trials in all of them, so I thought, all right, let's try something different. Quick look around, I find this old washing machine barrel. Now I often sell these as fire pits, but these more modern ones have a plastic section around the top. Some are filled with water, some have like a plaster or concrete type compound, and the weight gives the barrel balance and allows it to spin properly. So because that's plastic, this one's no good for a fire pit. And even if that was removed, which you can, they're just screwed in, the remaining barrel then is quite flimsy, so that actually gives it a bit of strength. So they're not really any good for fire pits, but as a little compost bin they may be perfect. You'll see it's got good aeration. There's holes right around all the sides and the bottom, and where the gearbox came through, I just put a bit of a mesh screen over the top so that all the content stays inside. And I've propped it up on blocks, so there's going to be really good airflow. And what I'm thinking is the compost should heat up, as grass normally does, but because it's got really good airflow, it shouldn't need to be turned or tumbled. The heating process, I believe, in composting is bacteria working away, and a critical part of that reaction is oxygen. And that's why if you have a pile of grass clippings in a bucket or in a enclosed container, they will go smelly. They'll actually go anaerobic, and the normal compost process with the good microbes doesn't happen, and you get a different family of microbes, I think, in an anaerobic condition. But it does get smelly, it gets sort of slimy, and it's not at all pleasant. So we'll try this method. I should have enough grass clippings here to fill that washing machine barrel, and we'll just keep an eye on it and see how much it heats up and whether it actually does make nice compost reasonably quickly. Okay, I've used all of the grass clippings. As you can see, it's filled it up, domed at the top. I didn't compact it too much. I want the air and the oxygen to stay in there, so I could have pressed it down and probably even got a little bit more in, but I didn't want to compress it too much. So now all we need to do is leave it, let the microbes get to work, and we'll stick the thermometer in tomorrow and just see if it's starting to heat up. Okay, it's 24 hours later. As you can see, the grass has sunk down a little bit. It's got a really nice sort of a pleasant composty smell to it. It does feel a little warm on the stainless steel. And if we have a look at the thermometer, she's cranked right up into the hot zone, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 Celsius. That's a really good temperature. It will be interesting to see how long this little experiment holds its temperature. Normally a small pile of grass like this would probably heat up for a day, day and a half, maybe two, and then cool down because it uses up all the oxygen. Now, because this one's vented underneath and around all the sides, it might continue to cook a bit longer. So all I'll do now, I'll just spray a little bit of water on the top to keep it damp, because it being hot it will kind of dry out, and that'll stop the bacterial action anyway. So we'll give it a little bit of water and we'll check the temperature tomorrow. Hopefully it's still hot. And now we're up to day 2 of this washing machine barrel composting experiment. The contents, the grass clippings, have slumped down quite substantially today, and there's quite a, well, not a strong, but a more noticeable aroma and sort of a sweet silage type smell. So that's brilliant. Have a look at the temperature. It's actually even hotter than yesterday. So that's really good. I think the extra oxygen coming through the holes in the barrel is really helping, because I would have expected a small amount like this to start cooling down the second day. So and feeling around the barrel, you can actually feel the heat around the base. So that's excellent. We'll leave it for another day and have a look then. Alright, day 3, quick update on this little composting experiment. We'll zoom straight into the thermometer, and it's as hot as it's been. I think it's about the same as it was yesterday, but that's an excellent temperature, as I've said. The grass clippings are slumping down even further, and you'll see they're kind of pulling back from the sides, so they're breaking down very quickly. Still a sweet kind of silage type smell, so that's good. I can still feel the heat through the metal. So day 3, and it's still nice and hot, is really, I think that's starting to prove that the oxygen flow through this barrel is really helping it. I'm absolutely sure if I did this little composting experiment in a enclosed tub or barrel without the airflow, it would have cooled down by now and probably gone quite stinky, because it would have run out of oxygen. So we'll check it again tomorrow. We're now up to day 4, and if we have a look at the thermometer, the temperature has finally pulled back. It's still in the active zone, just under 120 Fahrenheit, or about 46 Celsius. And it's not surprising it's pulled back, because there seems to be hardly anything left. The pile of grass clippings doesn't really afford a lot of room for the thermometer to work in. It's probably less than half, considering it was piled up, fairly high when we first started. So that's really good in that it stayed hot for a good long extended period of time, considering the size of this pile. There's no nasty smells. I'm tempted to dig into it, but I won't just yet. We'll leave it another day or two and just watch the temperature drop back a bit and see if it slumps down anymore. But then I will dig it out and we'll have a look and see what it's like. But before I do post this video, I've actually decided I'm going to do a comparison test with this clothes dryer barrel. It's around about the same size and there's no holes, so it'll be really interesting. I would expect the grass clippings will certainly go anaerobic and probably start to smell a bit. There are some holes at the bottom of the dryer barrel, but I'll put a piece of vinyl or something over that to block the airflow. And this really will demonstrate the value of airflow through a composting situation, and why the tumble ones work, because when you tumble the material, you're introducing oxygen. The large compost bin style ones that I run, I kind of need to dig over every now and again, which is a bit of hard yakka. But I reckon this is a great use for washing machine barrels, and I might even start marketing them as little compost bins because of their aeration characteristics. They may even be a good little worm farm option too, because of course your worms need oxygen through the material that they're working on. Alright, well I'll keep checking this for a day or two, and next time I mow my lawns I'll do a trial in that dryer barrel, and then we'll do a comparison at the end of this video. Okay, day 5, we'll do one final test on this little composting experiment. The temperature has finally pulled right down, so it's barely warm at all, but as I mentioned in the last section, there's hardly any materials left, So I'm going to tip it out now, given that it's supposed to rain tomorrow. I figured we'll have a look now before it gets drenched, and we'll see what the end product looks like. So I've just upended the barrel into this tub here. I'll have a look through. You can see that it's got a bit of mould. Oh, it still is a little bit warm inside. I can feel a bit of warmth. But it's not stinky. It looks like it's breaking down nicely. It's actually compacted itself a little bit. Grass around the edge has gone a little bit slimy. But generally it looks like it's starting to break down really nicely, and it's certainly not unpleasant. And that's reduced in size substantially from what we put in this barrel initially. The sieve, the little strainer I put on the bottom, must be in here somewhere. I'll find that in a minute. But yeah, it's been a really interesting experiment. So I think we'll get a bit of a measure here without it being compacted. It's pretty well filled that tub flat. So I could probably just spread that around my garden. I could add it to it now as just a slow cold compost bin to rot down further. With the mould and bacteria going on in here, I reckon the worms would get into it now. The heat's disappeared mostly, so probably a really good worm tucker. So I might spread a little bit there on a spot I've got and let the worms get into it. But we'll certainly do a comparison test. Remember, this was 5 days. We'll do a comparison test, and I've decided I'll use the same barrel rather than the drier barrel to keep everything sort of identical. I'll perhaps line it with something to stop the airflow, and then we'll do a comparison test. But I'll have to wait till I mow my lawns next. So I decided to put this the blue tub of grass clippings that had been hot composted into my little compost or worm farm here, because they'd reduced from, I think, as you remember, 3 full tubs at the start down to 1 tub in 5 days. I thought we may as well follow the degradation of these grass clippings to the end and see how long it takes. So they've been in this little drum for almost 3 weeks, and if you have a look here, the worms have just gone ballistic in these now, and I knew they would because the mould had started on the grass. They'd started breaking down with the heat, and now the worms are getting into them beautifully. There's springtails in there as well. All nature's little composters are hard at work. Now, that tub full of grass clippings has pretty well been reduced to a thin layer, because see under there's eggshells, which was in here before I added them. So there's only a thin layer left here, and it's being broken down very quickly. Let's have a look under the other mat. There's slaters and there's mountains of worms. So what a great way to process your grass clippings. 5 days in a hot compost situation, which has the bonus of killing any weed seeds, and then into a little compost situation, keep it damp, and the worms will get into it beautifully. And I'd say in another week or two that'll be pretty well totally just worm castings. So that's worked really well, but we will do the comparison on a similar amount of grass clippings in a washing machine barrel which doesn't have aeration. So similar size, similar conditions, but just not the aeration, and just see how it compares, just to show you how important the oxygen is to the composting process. Okay, time to do the comparison test now. I've mowed my lawns again. Same 3 tubs, same quantity, same materials, bit of grass, a few broadleaf weeds, some of the barley grass has come up to head. So there's sort of some lush type grass and there's a bit of drier stuff, so similar mix to last time. And we're going to use the same barrel, and I've actually lined it with, it's actually an old windscreen reflector. So I just sort of lined around the inside and just cut a few pieces to cover the base. So the good thing is that it's any fluid or any leachate that happens to develop will drain through. So and yet it will pretty well stop the airflow. So just about everything's going to be identical. So we'll fill up the tub and we'll set the test going. And there we go, she's fully loaded. That should look pretty similar to our first test. It's full, over the top, piled up a bit, not too compacted, so there should be a bit of airflow around it. So we'll stick the thermometer in tomorrow evening, 24 hours later, and then we'll do it consistently each day for a bit and see how it compares with the initial test. So day one of this second composting test, and you can see that the grass has slumped down substantially and the temperature is very hot. It's just over 150 degrees Fahrenheit, about 65 Celsius. So that's probably even a little bit hotter than the first attempt. And I can smell that sort of sweet silage type smell. I can feel the heat. It's even a bit warm around the side, but it has been a fairly warm day here all the same. We're just into summer, or almost into summer now. So, you know, the ambient temperature is a little bit warmer than the last time we did it. However, that's to be expected. I would imagine, though, that the oxygen is going to be used up fairly quickly. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 2 days. We'll check it again tomorrow evening. Alright, time to do the temperature test on this composting experiment. Day 2, and we've got a bit of a hiccup. We've had a terribly windy, hot day today. It's been total fire ban. It's been over 40 degrees Celsius, which is well over 100 Fahrenheit, and the wind has brought down my apricot tree. So no major drama, but I've obviously got to prune a few branches back so we can test the temperature. Alright, so now we've made a bit of room. I've stuck the thermometer in, and it's hot. It's off the scale as far as the 3 segments go. 160 Fahrenheit, 70 Celsius. That's very hot. The grass has slumped down a lot. It's pulled in from the sides. It's definitely hot. Mind you, it's, as I just mentioned, it's been extremely hot here today. So whether that's got an impact on it, I don't really know. But it's certainly really hot. But it'll be interesting if it keeps the heat, and that's what the test is going to be. With no ventilation, it may actually cool down and turn anaerobic. We'll check it tomorrow night. Okay, we're at day 3 now, and if we have a look at the thermometer, the temperature's pulled right back. The grass has slumped down mostly in the first 2 days and hasn't got much further. So what was initially about the same for the first 2 days of each composting test, day 3 is a huge difference, as in the original test, day 3 was still very hot, and day 3 here is pulled right back. Day 4 on the other one was about the same as this, and it continued to slump down a bit. The smell is much the same. It's not bad at this stage, but we'll leave it a couple more days and then we'll tip it out and do a comparison. But certainly it hasn't stayed as hot as long, which is pretty well what I expected. Day 4 on the composting test now, and I'm actually away today, and I had a friend take some photos, so here's a couple of photos to show that the temperature is right back. In fact, it's pretty much just the ambient outside temperature, so there's heat seems to have gone in this, but we'll check it again tomorrow and just do a final check. So day 5, and I figured this would be my last check, but for some reason the temperature shot right back up into the hot zone. I don't really know why. I certainly didn't expect this. This was, we only went 5 days on the initial test, and I tipped it out and it was pretty cold. But this one, I've just stuck the thermometer in, as you can see there, and it's right back up almost to as hot as it was. There's obviously been some heat generated because the grass on the top looks to have sort of been dried off a lot. The smell has gone a little bit off. It's got a bit of a sort of a sickly smell to it now. There's clearly a lot of hot heat in there. And if I have a quick peek in a little bit, I can feel the heat with my fingers. It looks very wet and a bit slimy, so I'll have to do some checking on this. Clearly the oxygen was all used up and it cooled down, which I expected, but I didn't expect it to heat up again. Now whether because it's anaerobic now, because I've assumed there's no oxygen, perhaps there's another strain of bacteria now that have taken over and they're generating their heat in an anaerobic situation. So I'm not sure. I'll do a bit of reading and I won't tip it out tonight. I'll check it in tomorrow and just see where we're at then. Alright, we're up to day 6 on this experiment, and it's still holding its heat. It's quite hot. The grass is compacted down further, but a couple of noticeable changes. It no longer has a sort of a nice sweet silage smell. It's actually starting to smell bad. There's flies and little bugs hanging around more so than what we had before. So I did a bit of reading, and apparently an anaerobic situation can actually generate heat as it breaks down. So clearly that's what's happened. We've gone from an aerobic composting, and then once the oxygen ran out, the heat died down, and now it's those bacteria have been killed off, and different bacteria now started their process, and it's generating heat again, which certainly surprised me. But now that I've read about it, it makes a bit of sense. So we'll keep monitoring this for a couple more days just to see how long it stays hot. There's certainly not much volume left, but it's going to start to smell bad, and I'll talk a little bit about anaerobic composting in the next section. So we'll check it again tomorrow. Okay, and just like that, it cools down. Just one day, and this has dropped right back into the steady zone, which is about 30 degrees Celsius. It got to about 30 here today. No, it probably wasn't quite that hot, but the heat certainly died down. The grass is looking decidedly yuck. It's starting to essentially go off, which is your anaerobic situation, since no oxygen can circulate through. So what we'll do now is we'll tip it out into this blue tub, which I tipped the other lot out into, you'll remember, on the first experiment, and we'll just see what we've got. Alright, so quantity wise we've got a similar size. This one actually went 7 days instead of 5, but if we look into it now, it's actually very wet. It is mouldy, but it's quite slimy, and it does smell. It smells rather unpleasant. So this is clearly lack of oxygen. There's new types of bacteria getting in here and are breaking it down. And it is a form of composting, anaerobic composting, but I think they call it digestive compost or something like that. It's essentially a putrefaction where, you know, there's been juices drip out the bottom that are sort of a leachate. This is really slimy. It's rather unpleasant to deal with. There's lots of flies starting to hang around it. So that's what's happened, is we ran out of oxygen. The bacteria that were thriving in the oxygen rich composting situation all died off, and it's very dense now. It compacted down in the middle, and then a new strain of bacteria that can live without oxygen started their work, and it creates a very unpleasant product, and it would continue to rot down. It takes quite a long time, this method, and I believe it becomes very acidic. And what I read about anaerobic compost is essentially it needs to sit for nearly 12 months. The advantage is you can put anything in there and you keep a lid on something to keep it airtight and you won't get the smells, but it's rather unpleasant to work with until it's finished. And then I believe it's very acidic, so not suitable to put on the garden straight away. The worms certainly won't like it, and it needs to revert back to an aerobic type bacteria to to sort of neutralise the acidity. So that's what I believe, well, from what I've read, that's how I believe it works. So experiment successful in that this little washing machine barrel makes an excellent hot composting tub for the aeration. When I blocked the aeration off, it hot composted for a couple of days, then dropped off quickly, and then started to heat up in a different sort of composting format, as we've discovered, which isn't at all pleasant to work with. I need to go and wash my hands now, they smell quite bad. And it would only get worse if you were going to leave something in this form of composting. You'd need to have a lid on it, have an airtight container. But yeah, the experiment was to see how this tub goes, and it works really good for grass clippings composting when you get the airflow through. So I'm going to be using that for my grass clippings. It would also help to add a bit more carbon. There wasn't a lot of carbon with these grass clippings, they're very high in nitrogen, but it was a good subject to do a test on for this barrel. So okay, thanks for watching. This video kind of went on a bit of a tangent, but we followed it through, and we, I think, hopefully understand a bit more about composting now. And I'm certainly going to be pulling these barrels out of washing machines that I get in the e-waste scrap. Okay, we'll catch you in the next video. Bye.